welcome to this next video. I think we're on part 6. Positive and negative externalities in production is the goal for today. So I'd like to remind you on MPC, MEC and MSC. Crucial. If you don't have the definitions, definitely get them down now. MPC is the cost a firm must pay for the firm to produce an extra unit of the good or service. MEC, the cost third parties face for the firm to produce an extra unit of the good or service. MSC, total cost society faces for the firm to produce an extra unit of the good or service. And then remember, you can add these up. If you add these up, MPC plus MEC, you get the MSC. And this thing in the middle, the MEC, marginal external cost, is actually what we know as the externality. And this is about supply. So actually this is the externality in production. If you want to remind the words MSC, marginal social cost, MEC, marginal external cost, MPC, marginal private cost. Now that we've got that, let's take a look. If you have a positive externality in production, we know a few things already. We know it's about production, so we know we're going to use the words costs, either MPC, MEC, or MSC. We know, because of the word positive, we know that third parties are being helped. And as a result of them being helped, we don't want to give them costs, right? The vocab that we have for the production externalities is marginal external cost. So we don't want to increase their costs because we want to help them. So instead, how we communicate that third parties are being helped, we can use a negative sign. Third parties are having their costs reduced. They've had help. They've benefited as a result of the firm producing the good or service. Sometimes this is called an external benefit, but I'm going to call it, for the purpose of this video, links it nicer to the equation, marginal external cost with a negative sign. The same, if it's a negative externality in production, you're unfortunately harming third parties. And this is a really bad situation, right? Third parties, they had nothing to do with the supply and demand of the good, yet they're being harmed. As a result, you want to communicate the harm, and the way to do this is actually you want to add costs onto the third parties. And this is the super bizarre thing about this, where we say, okay, negative, because it's harmful, negative production externality, what that actually means is the MEC is a positive. You're adding costs onto third parties. So that's definitely fun to get your head around. Write that down. Super interesting. Super fun, I think, too. Funny, maybe it's a better word. And the next one, as a result, we're going to see that the MSC is lower than the MPC at each quantity for the positive production case. Remember, how do we see this? MSC is the sum of MPC plus MEC. So really what you're doing with the positive production thing is you're doing MSC equals MPC minus MEC. And because of that, you will get the MSC lower than the MPC. With the negative externality in production, where you're adding costs onto third parties, you are adding costs just like that, and that will pull up your social cost to be higher than your MPC. Before we move on, I want to emphasize one thing, one super important. At each quantity, the social cost is lower than the MPC. On the one on the right, at each quantity, the MSC is higher than MPC. So I'm really thinking from a quantity kind of perspective. So if I were to sketch a graph, at each quantity like Q1, Q2, Q3, I want the MSC, imagine this is the MSC, I want it to be lower than the MPC at each quantity. Even at Q2, I want the MSC to be lower than the MPC. There's a long way to tell you what I mean is the MSC is going to be lower than the MPC. And I know this is something that gets people confused. So that's the way to think about it. It's literally lower. And the one on the right, you follow the same process, you'll find the MSC is higher than the MPC at every quantity. So here's a summary: positive externalities in production, negative externalities in production. You've got the graphs, get those graphs down. I've taken the opportunity to draw in the MEC. Remember, with the positive, you're removing costs. So you're dragging the cost that the firm has faced. Firms paid quite high costs, and society has had less costs than they have faced due to this negative MEC. So it's pulled down the MPC. Whereas with the negative production externality, it's pulled up the MPC. It's added costs onto third parties, resulting in a higher MEC. And finally, if there are no externalities in production, MEC is 0, and therefore MSC equals MPC, which is why sometimes you might see MSC equal MPC. You're just making it clear that you're assuming that there are no externalities in production. Next video is on why the MPC slopes upwards. Stay tuned, that's a great video. Thank you so much, bye!